Well, welcome everyone to the September Town Hall, and I couldn't be more excited about our presentation today. But as normal, we'll get started with just a little bit of housekeeping. So during this presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function within Zoom, and then I will read those questions aloud to our presenter at the end of his presentation. So we will hold all questions to the end. If you have questions for IGSHPA outside of this presentation, always feel free to email us at info@igshpa.org, and we will be happy to get back with you. So I am Courtney. I am chairperson of the IGSHPA Board of Directors. And again, I just thank everyone for their participation and joining us today. These town hall events have been very well attended, and we couldn't do any of this without your participation. So if there are speaking engagements that you would like to hear or topics you'd like to hear talked about, you can always email us at info@igshpa.org, and we will be happy to put those into consideration. Our last town hall event will be next month. And then we're going to put a little pause on them and wait until after the conference, and we'll pick them back up in January. So again, if you have any topics you'd like to hear discussed or gone through, feel free to email those to info@igshpa.org. And just as a reminder, we do have the conference coming up. Again, I couldn't be more excited about the partnership with National Groundwater Association and the opportunity that we have to join them in Nashville this year. We're really working on just an incredible lineup of speakers and really starting to get some good exhibitors. I'm excited about the encouragement that we've gotten from the marketplace, and what better opportunity to get in front of some drillers and talk about how great geothermal is than at the conference that they'll be at. So again, if you have questions about the conference, you can also email us at info@igshpa.org, or just go to the website and you can register either there as an exhibitor or as an attendee. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Scott. Scott Musgrave with ORCA is here to talk about third-party ownership and some opportunities for residential district systems. So Scott, take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Courtney. And hello, everybody. It's great to be here. And I want to thank IGSHPA for having me, first of all, and allowing me to share my story and what we do, a little bit about our business model. I want to thank IGSHPA for all that they do. I've been a part of different industries before, and groups like this and associations are critical to our success as an industry. And so I really appreciate everything that IGSHPA has done. I've seen a lot of the results of their work. A lot of times it's a labor of love, and I look forward to supporting them and being a part of, actively helping this industry, because I am just really excited about what we are doing as an industry, what I'm doing personally as a part of it. And I'll share a little bit of that with you. But first of all, well, okay, so talking about an industry like this, and this is kind of weird for me, because I know there's a whole bunch of you out there, but I'm just kind of sitting in my typical office. And so it's an interesting dynamic that we've all kind of gotten used to here. And I was going to share some stories about Zoom calls that I've been on that, and I'm sure all of you have got some really bizarre, interesting, weird things that have happened. It'd be interesting to kind of gather those stories up and see who's got the weirdest or funniest one. But I was thinking actually putting myself on a stage of a concert, right? So that, we're kind of on this big stage with thousands of people, but you just get to see the background of my office. So in a group like this, and in an industry association, there's usually, we all have differing interests, right? We're all a part of this business. We have different business interests that, we're here for. And what I wanted to do is I actually wanted to divide us into just two groups for today, and maybe kind of a third group. So there's one group that's here that's part of the industry. We are all here because this is our industry. Whether it's full-time or maybe it's part-time for some of us, it's part of what our business does. but we're here because we want to drill more holes. We're here because we want to sell more heat pumps. We're here because, we want to install more heat pumps, or we want to, maybe there's some legal representation here, negotiate contracts, all of those different interests. But we're the group that makes our money from this industry. We're here to grow this industry and to expand our businesses. And then there's another group that is typically not as many, unfortunately, but we hope they're all here. But they are the ones that I'll call them the buyers or the users, right? They're the users of the systems, and they're the decision makers, or they influence decisions that would grow this industry. And so, they're the ones that are here kind of trying to learn more about what geothermal can do for their business, whether they're developers or architects or engineers that influence decisions. And that's that second group. And actually, that's the group that I was a part of, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But then there's a kind of a third group, I guess, that's probably here, and they are those that are interested in the industry and trying to learn more. And it could be consultants that maybe want to find out more about geothermal, make it a part of their business, or it could be, I'm hoping that maybe even there's some political representation here. Maybe there's some staffers that are looking at geothermal and how they can understand it better and maybe construct policy decisions that help it. Or there could be some finance companies that are thinking about getting into this. So, but usually there's those two groups that I just mentioned, and I at one time was a part of that buyer decision maker kind of process, and I made a decision a couple of years ago to jump into this industry because I got so excited about it. So and so maybe I think what I want to do is I want to talk about I'm with ORCA Energy, and we are a part of Geotility, and I think that's a name that's been around the industry for a while. I don't want to make this a Geotility ORCA commercial, but I want to talk a little bit maybe about our business model and why it makes sense to me, and why I think that geothermal as a service is a business model that can help us grow as an industry. But first, I think it's going to be helpful for everybody to understand, a little bit about my background and the perspective that I have when it comes to this industry in particular, but just, kind of in general, delivering a service like this. So at one time, just kind of going back a few years, I worked for, and I talk about geothermal, and I say I came into geothermal through the side door because it wasn't a real planned event for me or a pathway that I ever could have foresaw, right? I never even knew it existed actually until a few years ago. But at one time I worked for a wireless ISP, and we were delivering internet services, and this is back in the early 2000s. And I had a number of developers come to us that were doing these large master plan projects. They were building thousands of homes, and they couldn't get internet service. And so they came to me because I was an alternative to the large internet providers who are Verizon and Time Warner and AT&T. And they asked for us to come to their project because they couldn't get internet. So I recognized that as an opportunity, and I decided to start a company. I got some investors, and we had developers involved in the beginning, and we started a company that built fiber to the home systems. And so we would work with these large developers and plan these systems, and we would dig up the ground. We would put infrastructure into the ground. We would then trench it up to the house and enter the house with our network. And then when people moved in, we would deliver a service to those people, the internet service. And at the time we were doing TV and telephone, which now are antiquated services. Everything's internet. But we were delivering a service and charging a monthly fee for doing that. So we invested our money in infrastructure, we delivered a service, and people paid for that. And that's exactly what I'm doing today. And that's exactly what ORCA does. It just is a different type of service. It's geothermal. Well, we built that company up and then sold it. And shortly after that, one of our investors was a large real estate developer that had a big portfolio of projects across the country. And they had started their own internet service, and they were having some issues with it. So they asked me to come in and help them figure out, what to do. And so we solved that problem, restructured it, and I spent some time with them. But in that process, I got to understand the land development industry really well. And I spent a lot of time throughout the entire company understanding everything that they do, as a part of their business and their business model. What I found was that developers build infrastructure as a means to an end, meaning that they will do all of this work up front. They will subdivide, they will do environmental studies, they will do engineering, they will eventually put infrastructure into the ground, horizontal infrastructure, all of the utilities, and do all the grading and everything that's involved in that, so that eventually they can have a parcel, a piece of land that they can put a building on, that can be built on. That's their end product. And eventually they'll either sell that or they might build it themselves. But they do all of that work and they put all that money into infrastructure so that eventually they have a product that is their business. And for them, infrastructure is a cost of doing business, basically. And so what I did is we started a company that made infrastructure its focus and created extra value and revenue streams from that infrastructure that they were going to build anyways. We just did it in a different way, a lot like we did with fiber to the home. When it came to fiber to the home, we were building these networks, creating a long-term revenue, and we were sharing that with the developer. What the developer does is he builds a business that goes on forever for a lot of these other companies like internet companies. So we started this infrastructure development company, and we had 5 different pillars, if you will, of infrastructure assets that we were pursuing. And those were, of course, fiber system. That was my background. Cell towers. We would look for opportunities to put cell towers up, and that became part of our business. Water, wastewater treatment systems, which we would do on site, and then geothermal. And this is where I got introduced to geothermal. And it was a company that came to us and said, hey, you ought to think about doing geothermal in all of your big communities. And I said, well, okay, I'm from California and we have geothermal power plants. Is that what you're talking about? So I had to go through that whole learning experience to understand, no, that's not the kind of geothermal we're referring to. It's geothermal, heat transfer from the earth. And so I was on the side where I didn't know what geothermal was, 5 years ago, let's say. And as I started to initially learn more about it, I was really feeling kind of like a dummy, because I was like, well, this is so fantastic. Why haven't I heard about this? How come I don't know about this? What have I missed? How have I missed this? Because I'm sure that everybody else must know about this. And what I found out was that I'm not alone. That as I talk to people within real estate development and builders, at that time especially, it's becoming better now, but at that time especially, no, not many people learned about it. So the more I looked at it and the more I learned about it, let me back up. So at that point, the way our business model worked is we had partners, and partners were the ones that would fulfill all of our requirements. So we had a cell tower company that built and operated cell towers, and we had a fiber to the home company. And so I was seeking a company that could build and operate geothermal systems in our communities. And that's how I got introduced to ORCA Energy and to Geotility. And what I found was that they had created this business model that really perfectly aligned with what we were looking for. They had the experience, the knowledge, the capabilities to design and build. but then they also took on the responsibility for ongoing operations and for the funding for doing that. So we started a dialogue, and over the course of a couple of years, for many reasons, I saw the opportunity for a company like ORCA and for the geothermal industry itself to experience explosive growth. There were so many factors that were happening that I felt like the opportunity was huge. And now that I, jumped in and I understand that we represent 1%, that in order for us to even experience 50% growth, which would be magnanimous, is very achievable. So I made a decision, to personally become part of ORCA, or I transitioned then from that buyer side to now being a part of the industry. And our ORCA's business model, I'll start talking a little more now about what we do and how we do it and why I think it makes sense. Our business model has a lot of names to it, right? Third party owned is a common name. In the solar industry, there's an analogous term called PPA, right? Power purchase agreements. We don't create power. Maybe we could call it TPA, right? Thermal purchase agreement. There's an engineering company that I work with, and they only call it a DBOOM: design, build, own, operate, and maintain. And that's a term that I have heard quite a bit, but I just call it a utility model. Whenever I'm talking to a developer, I'm talking to a home buyer even, or anybody, when you use the term utility model, utility service, that strikes a chord. That resonates with them. They can relate to that. And so I call our business a utility model, and we design, build, own, and operate long-term these geothermal systems that we install, mostly in residential communities, but it typically includes commercial, retail, and we do all types of systems, including district energy systems. So whatever it is, whatever the situation calls for, we've got the internal capabilities to come in and design and show those. I thought what I would do is share my screen and just show you a couple of things that ORCA and Geotility, we are part of Geotility. ORCA Energy is a geotility company, was started about 12 years ago. But I am going to pull up. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully you all can see that. So, we've got a value proposition to the developer and to the home buyer that I think, removes one of the biggest obstacles that we all face, and that's that upfront cost. So, that was something that we had dealt with as a developer. We couldn't absorb that cost and couldn't add that to the cost of the home or the lot. And so, and that was the case with our business model anyways. Everything that we did, whether it was fiber to the home or wastewater treatment systems, of course, we weren't charging homeowners for building their wastewater treatment system. We would just charge them a monthly fee. And that's why, to me, that makes the most sense. But I'm going to show you a couple of things that Geotility has done. These are not necessarily, in fact, they're not utility models, but they're kind of cool projects. So as an industry, I think we all need to be able to brag about what people are doing and projects that are running on geothermal. And this would be one of them. This is the Lucas Museum, and it's in downtown Los Angeles. That's the LA Coliseum in the background. It's right near the USC campus. And this is George Lucas and his wife commissioned this museum and are building it. It's about $1 billion project. And there's going to be about $1 billion worth of their own art collection that'll be displayed inside along with additional other art from other sources and some technology exhibits and things like that. Next slide, you'll see another rendering of the project on the left, but what you'll see on the right are the drilling that was taking place. That's a part of the scope of our project. And we are right in the critical path. So we are drilling right underneath the footprint of the building itself. And coming right behind us are the concrete pourers that'll pour right over after we're done. There's a cool picture here from the top of the building. That's the Coliseum way over to the right. And you again can see all the drilling that's taking place there. So it's a very high coordination, complex type of project. I'm going to show you another one, but I can't. The Bullitt Center, there's another one coming after this I want to show you too. The Bullitt Center is it's part of the Living Building Challenge. I think it won that award a couple of years in a row, and it was one that time called the greenest building in the world, and it's net zero everything basically. It's completely self-contained and zero discharge of anything. So it uses all of the water, wastewater. It creates its own power. That's why the roof is so big to house all of the PV panels. And our company did the geothermal field that's underneath the building. There's a current project that's going on that's a complete rebuild of the Microsoft campus. And Microsoft is going actually not only carbon neutral, but carbon negative. What they want to do is erase all of the carbon that they've emitted since their inception. So they're becoming carbon negative, and it's one of the largest, if not the largest, private geothermal projects in the country. And there's a little video here I want to show you. Now, this is exactly what they're doing as far as rebuilding this entire campus. And when it's done, here, I'll do it one more time. And that's what it'll look like. So, you know, I mean, and these are just projects that are, you know, we like to brag about a little bit. In reality, you know, what I'm doing on a daily basis is sitting in front of developers and builders that are doing large master plan communities, whether they're mixed use, high density, multifamily, whatever it is, and talking to them about supplying geothermal energy, reducing their carbon footprint, eliminating all of their condensers and chillers and their outside air conditioners, providing a better service to their community, and showing them just, you know, kind of a better way than some of the more traditional heating and cooling methods that are being used. And, you know, oftentimes, inevitably, there's people in the room that don't understand what geothermal is. So, you know, to me, you know, a lot of what I do is education, and that's, as an industry, what I think, you know, we are in the process of. And Courtney and I were talking a little bit about that earlier. Of course, you know, I feel that the business model where a company like an ORCA is absorbing that cost and charging users for their use makes a lot of sense. And, you know, when I talk about this, I equate it to other utilities, because again, I call what we do a utility service, which it really is. And I compare it to, you know, the power companies or, you know, wastewater or other utilities that, you know, you don't need to pay for that infrastructure. You're not responsible as a home buyer for deciding, you know, what type of wires are going to go into your electricity and how many, you know, a home buyer shouldn't be concerned about how many loop feet their geothermal system has, or what kind of grout is going to be used in the system, or you know, all the various engineering decisions that go into how we do what we do. And so, I'm a firm believer in that whole utility model. And I think it'll help the industry grow when people have alternatives for how their systems are paid for. But what I want to kind of transition to is, as an industry, what I see, and I've been a part of, several different industries throughout my career, including I started actually in technology. I worked for IBM for 10 years, was a part of the software industry when it experienced huge growth. And then I became a part of the internet industry, and I saw what it went through. And there's, industries all go through this as they grow. And we are in an early adoption phase. And so with that, I see our current mission as an education one. And so what I wanted to just kind of end with is talk about what we can be doing as an industry and what I'm seeing happening, which is exciting to kind of experience. First of all, going back to those two users, right? If you're in the user category and you're a decision maker or an influencer, what you can do to help is do more geothermal. Help us drill more holes and help us put more systems in place. No, but seriously, people that are a part of other industries that are thinking about using geothermal, help us get the word out. Help any kind of events that you have, or any kind of mediums like newsletters, or however you can help us become more known in your industry, is what I would say. Call me. We'll do lunch and learns. We'll do all kinds of things to help get the word out and help the rest of the world understand, like I didn't, what geothermal really is. And I like to call it, when I talk about geothermal heating and cooling, I call it the best kept secret in new renewable energy. And I think it is, because when you understand the impact that we have on things like net zero energy and on decarbonization, those are things that the rest of the world needs to know, and they don't. And so we have to change from being that best kept secret to everybody knowing, oh, of course, geothermal. I have a little anecdote story that's that I just experienced, and I think you'll find it interesting. So about 2 weeks ago, I was in an airport for one of my first times in a long time, and it was packed. And there was a bunch of storms going on around the country, and so all the airports were backed up. And so I think I was in Chicago O'Hare. And I was sitting there doing some work. And of course, I talk about geothermal all day long. People talk to me about it. I'm doing emails about it. So it's not unusual for me to hear that term. And I'm sitting there waiting for a flight that's late. And the airport's just, all the chairs are full of them. Everybody's just sitting, and the TV's going off in the distance. And I hear this geothermal conversation going on. And it took me about 30 seconds to look up and realize, like, oh my gosh, that's on the TV. That's Kathy Hanoun being interviewed on CNN. And there's like a 20-minute segment that everybody in the airport, of course, airports have their own channel, right? Their own CNN channel. And it's being blasted out across all airports across the country, I'm sure. And here she is, touting all of the benefits and educating everybody that's there about geothermal. I actually pulled out my phone. I should have had the video here, but I pulled out my phone and I recorded it to show the people in the meeting that I was going to. Like, this is what we need more of. There are champions in our business, and we need to celebrate those champions, and we need more of them. We need more stories like that, right? Whether it's Whisper Valley or it's Serenbe, or it's, I can name Norton. There's all kinds of projects, and there's companies now that are entering the business, and it's exciting to see. I mean, for me, that was like a thrilling moment. And so, what I want to help do is to get that message out. And so I'm looking forward to being a part of this. Of course, I'm excited about our business model and the way that we approach the business, but everybody here, has their own interest, and everybody here is going to benefit from the rising of this industry. And it's, we're at a very, very exciting time. And there's so many things that are happening right now with climate change and with beneficial electrification. Whoever knew that was a term, 5 years ago, right? Now it's something that everybody is really talking about. So there's this groundswell of things that are happening that if we can get out in front of that, and geothermal can be something that's forefront on people's minds, we can ride that like a wave. I've seen it happen, and I'm excited to be a part of it and to help, facilitate that. And
we have some great questions, Scott, in the chat. So one of the questions we have is, did you do both projects shown as utility model, or how do you charge equivalent KW or KWH charge?
Sure. So no, those are just bragging projects that Geotility did. Microsoft and Lucas, for that matter, they weren't really concerned about cost. And in large commercial projects like that, a lot of times it'll just be a Geotility project that they build for on behalf of the owner or for the owner as a project. But we have done, and we're currently doing a number of commercial projects. They're not as sexy as those are, but they are utility projects. And the second half of your question, as far as how we charge, there's a couple of different methods of charging. One is just per ton. So we'll build a certain size system and we'll charge a per ton amount. We usually do not equate that to kilowatt hours, although we do have a usage model that we have used in the past as well that's more based on amount of usage. We're working with one real estate developer that charges everything by the square foot. And so we've kind of scheduled our fees now down to the square foot. So that's kind of a unique thing that we're doing. We're seeing that could make a lot of sense, especially in commercial environments.
So another question is, does ORCA do work in New York? And have you looked at going into New York as a service territory?
So the answer to that is yes. Actually, that's one of our target markets. We are not nearly as active as I'd like to see us in New York. And everybody probably understands that there's a lot of interest from NYSERDA and New York power companies to get more geothermal involved. And so the answer to that is absolutely, we would be interested in New York.
So one question, and I think that this could be a broad answer, is generally speaking, how many homes does it need to be to make this feasible? Specifically, the question was, if you could get an existing community to commit, what's the volume that really makes this model work?
Sure. That's a really great question. We get asked that a lot. But first, I'm going to address an existing community because there are unique challenges when you're doing a retrofit. And that's not to say that we wouldn't take that on, but you get involved then in the interior equipment and replacement, and you just need to be careful about what's there currently and how you design a system to effectively replace that. So that's a unique challenge, one that I'm really happy to look at, pursue, and figure out. But it's a little different than new construction, and that's why we target new construction, because if you're building a new community and you can design your bore fields and your boreholes, and you design your equipment with the architecture of the house from the beginning, it's just a lot easier. Now I forgot what was the first part of the question.
That's okay. I mean, and
Oh,
really,
how many homes? How many homes?
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
so for us, entering a new state, there's quite a bit of legal work that we do up front, because we end up securing the thermal rights, and we have easements and contracts that we need to set up. So if it's a new state that we're going into, then it's about 100 homes. We can be flexible on that sometimes if it's a strategic, builder that's got a project of 50 homes, but they've got several others, or there's more of the activity in the area. But once we're in a state, there's really, I mean, if it's a 10 or 15 home project, that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Our business, unlike the fiber to the home business, right, where we used to have several hundred homes in order for us to build our system, because we have to have the entire system built before we could turn on one home. Our system scales, quite nicely, scales down quite nicely. But we just need to be established within the state first. And we're already in, about a dozen states. So there's a possibility we're already in that state.
So one question was asked, and you kind of touched on it briefly, but how do you compute how you come up with monthly participation costs for the systems? I mean, you kind of touched on tonnage or cost per square foot, but generally, what is the model that the homeowners see charged to them?
Sure. So we go through a fairly rigorous process for each new project that we look at. And, it starts with all of the geology reports and the analysis. And we do, of course, heat loss, heat gain analysis. So we have all of this input and upfront work that we do to eventually create a very detailed financial model that eventually will dictate what we need to charge, just like a utility, right? We are a utility. We put infrastructure in the ground, and then we recoup that cost and make a profit. So we need to figure out what it's going to cost to build and operate, and then that'll determine what the rates are going to be. And of course, incorporated into all of that are the various subsidies that are available that are critically important. And if I can plug here, there's legislation going on right now. Infrastructure has a huge focus in this, political environment, especially. And that's something that as an industry, we need to be all over. And so, that's going to really make a big difference on our business personally and all of yours as well. So those subsidies, and whether they come from the government or they come from power companies, because that's another source, we have a very synergistic relationship from a business model perspective with power companies. Anyways, enough of that soapbox. We go through a financial analysis process, and that determines our rates. You're on mute.
Sorry, we had somebody stomping around. I was trying to make sure that wasn't in the call. But just a question I have. So when you're talking to developers, one, what's the biggest one thing that they latch onto? And two, do you find that by offering this service that you're saving capital investment from the developer on the upfront? Is that one of the things that attracts them? But yes, if you could pick like one major selling point that they just buy in and think this is a great idea. And then two, is there financial incentive for them to do this by eliminating that infrastructure cost to them?
Sure. Great question. And it's always interesting to me it's almost like a treasure hunt to try to find out what the hot button is, right? And just like, other companies, other people's, developers have different cultures, different perspectives, and they're all different, right? So there's not just a single answer that I can give you, because in some cases a developer might think this is the best thing because of their view and their culture. And in another case, a developer might think it's the worst thing because it's going to change their business model. But there are some typical things that I run into, let's just say. One of those, and I guess I probably should have touched on it, but our biggest competitor as an industry is not the other people that do the same things that you do in this room. Our competitor is the status quo. And our competitor is changing the mindset or changing the way that things are done. And, developers and builders especially are ones that really don't like change, right? They've been doing things a certain way for decades, right? I mean, I'm watching the industry try to go through a change in how they build a building, right? It's been built the same way since the early 1900s. You put up a bunch of sticks and then you frame it. Anyways, so its change is probably the biggest thing that I get as far as objections go. They think about, well, how is this going to be different? How am I going to have to train my trades? How is my HVAC company going to deal with this fancy new equipment? Where you're going to be putting holes in the ground? How's that going to affect my landscaping and my other utilities and my critical path? You can't change my timing. From a financial perspective, we eliminate a large number of things that you typically go into the construction of the home, right? So now we have no more fossil fuels. So that eliminates a lot of the gas infrastructure, unless they're going to have gas for fireplace or stoves. There's no ventilation required. We eliminate the outdoor air conditioner. So all the, the pad that goes there, as well as the electrical component. And oftentimes, I've heard several developers, when they understand that we take that away because of the high density now that's being designed in communities, that's a big, big factor. When you tell them that they get that space back, they don't have to design around it, they don't have to plant some shrubs around it, and there's no noise that's going to be, part of the community coming from those condensers. That's one of the biggest factors right now that I'm seeing developers react to.
What percentage of ORCA's projects are retrofit versus new construction?
We are, I would say, 95% or more new construction. And, we intentionally focus on that. So.
Right. No, I mean, why not get it on the upfront? I mean, when they're starting, when
they're
really developing that property.
And to that point, right? The other thing, I talk about all these factors that are happening that are outside of our industry that are creating opportunity for us, right? We're in one of the largest housing shortages that's our country has ever experienced. And that's creating one of the largest housing booms that we've ever gone through. And I don't see any end in sight, at least not in the foreseeable future. So there's going to be continuous building going on for at least the next decade. And that's why we focus on new construction, because there's so much of it.
Are you experiencing a driller shortage in any of the areas that you're working in, or have you noticed a problem with finding qualified installers?
Yeah, so there are a number of partners, vendors, trades that we depend on, right? And that's a great point. And I would say yes, drilling is the very first thing that we go to. We do all of our geology analysis and things like that, but then our very next question is, okay, who are we going to get to drill this? And, what are our choices in these markets and things like that? I would say absolutely, in a lot of places, drilling is a challenge for us. Now, having said that, we go into a new market, there may not be other drilling opportunities for a company like yours, maybe, in that particular market. But hopefully, we're going to be able to create that opportunity. What we're looking at are large scale projects. So, we would look at a project that may have a 5-year life to it, and there would be continuous drilling for 5 years. And that would allow you to scale up, mobilize, and do what you need to do. Same thing on the installation side, right? Which I think is probably going to be easier to solve, because when the demand gets created for geothermal, I think the installers are going to be excited about learning a new technology and adding another, arrow to their quiver, so to speak, for what they do.
Sure, absolutely. So does ORCA plan, or have you heard about the Con Ed's Heat as a Service program, part of a PSC order?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know about that.
Absolutely. And Bob Wyman was gracious enough to include the link, so I'll send it on to you
Please.
after this call.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to learn about it.
Absolutely. So next question, you referenced Norton Commons, and they don't interconnect their homes. And I know that there's a few projects across the country that don't, but then there are projects like Whisper Valley that do. What are the reasons that they should use a common field versus independent? And are you seeing the potential for thermal storage being bigger with geothermal?
Really good questions. So to us, it's all a function of an engineering exercise that equates to a business case. And what I mean by that is, our business model is dependent upon what we charge the users, which is dependent upon what it costs for us to build the system, right? And there are inherent benefits as well for one versus the other, and those can be debated too, whether you're using a common loop system or individual loops. In most cases, for single family homes, if it's just a large single family home development, we find that single individual loop systems per home make the most sense. And it's just about, making the sense. It depends on if there's a diversity of load, that'll have a factor. Or if there's really high density, oftentimes that'll lend itself more to common loop systems. And then as far as thermal storage goes, we are seeing some cases that are more in a district energy environment that we're involved in, where that is something we're considering. We're kind of incorporating that into our engineering exercise. I can't say that we've actually designed one yet, but it's actually something that, interestingly, that it's brought up that we are talking about and looking at. You're on mute.
Darn, sorry, all these alerts. So would ORCA provide TPO for individual single family homes?
Well, we are talking to a group of individual home owners, builders. It's kind of an interesting project. It's a bunch of individuals that bought, I think there's 25 or 30 lots in this one development, and they're all building individual homes. I think we would take a look at that, but we're not like let's just say, I mean, Dandelion has a great business model, and they do individual homes and they do retrofit. We typically just go after developers in the planning stages of a project and try and do the entire project.
Are there any changes that we should seek in law, tax policy, et cetera, that would encourage the use of geothermal TPO?
Yes. Right now, there's the parity in solar bill that's being proposed. And I know Geo is involved in the lobbying efforts that are going on that would equate the 26% tax credit that solar receives compared to our 10%. That would be, I would say, huge. So that's one effort. And, I know a number of people in the industry are involved in writing letters and pushing for that. And I would suggest, everybody help with that, because that would have a big impact. Obviously, extending the homeowner solar credit would be huge. And for us, I'll just kind of throw this out there because I don't know who's in the audience, but one of the things that would make a big difference and to us would be the transferability of that tax credit. And I'm getting a little bit deep into tax law here, which is, I'm way outside of my comfort zone and my expertise. But, there's certain tax credits that are transferable and some that aren't. And right now, that homeowner credit for the tax credit that they receive for their renewable energy credit is not, and we'd like to see it changed.
No, that sounds like that would be a huge deal.
Yeah.
What's the most common reasons developers say no? And what needs to change in order to make TPO used more often? I know you touched on really education, but is there something else that really drives them to say no?
The only time that we've had a real, come down to a no decision is because the costs were so high for us that the utility rates were too high, and it was an entry level type project. So in other words, the drilling conditions and the geology and a number of factors that went into our upfront costs made the project just not feasible, or we would need to charge, too high of a monthly rate to the end users. That's been the only time that we've really seen, a no. Honestly, we have yet to have a builder say, no for any reason that's not something like that.
Are you seeing mostly vertical installed, or have you done any directionally drilled or horizontal systems?
Yeah, so we're looking at a number of different, probably 80% or more of what we do is vertical boreholes. Again, not being an engineer and being new to the industry, I think there's a lot of technical reasons for that. It just seems to be, for us, the most straightforward, easy, predictable way to install our systems. That was kind of a surprise to me, because I kind of thought that horizontal fields, in large sports complexes or something like that, parks would be the easiest way to do this. But most of our stuff is horizontal. We are looking at some directional drilling. We're looking at some open loop systems in certain parts of the country. So, we kind of have, fortunately for me, being a part of Geotility, they've kind of done it all and seen it all. They've been around so long, they can, use that experience to look at any new situation and know kind of what's the best way to accomplish the end goal. But most of the time that is vertical drilling.
What's the typical length in time of the TPO contracts, and what's the main driver to determining the length of time of those contracts?
Sure. Well, we look at ourselves as a utility service, and we have a long-term ownership of the assets that we install. Although I'll say this, but it's not something that we typically talk about. There have been some cases where we'll do a buyout clause after a certain period of time in our system, but our contracts are typically, 25 years with another 25 years. So we're looking at 50-year contracts.
That's quite a duration. That's very cool. One question someone just asked is, are TPO assets considered limited use by the IRS?
I don't know.
Get tax credits, or does the building owner?
We receive the tax credits for the installation of the infrastructure.
Okay. And that's part of, I would assume, what we're talking with transferring the credits, that the specifically with the homeowner getting access to these systems, that tax credit being transferred back to ORCA, I would assume makes this just more affordable in the long run.
Correct.
Perfect. What barriers are there to constructing district geothermal systems, especially in urban areas where they make a lot of sense? Would it make more sense for municipalities or states to finance these, or how do you see? I mean, I know some of the projects that you mentioned, like Whisper Valley down in Austin. I mean, Austin's just booming. So how do you see these? And I would say that that probably lends to the vertical answer is it's hard to put a horizontal system in the middle of the city. But anyway, yeah, how do you see that? What barriers do you see for more urban installations?
Well, really good question and a great topic. And what I'm seeing, and again, it's we're just getting a certain amount of exposure from our world, but what we are seeing, in my mind, district systems were typically municipally sponsored, right? It would be a small city that wanted to build something that their own buildings would benefit from, and then they would sometimes extend that out to other commercial buildings in a downtown area or something like that. What we are seeing though, and this, a lot of times this comes from a developer that has a more environmentally conscious viewpoint to new development, but not always. But we are seeing some of these high density mixed use projects that want to understand how a district energy system could be incorporated into their overall design. And part of that has to do with kind of this new urban design concept that's being built around the country, where you've got almost these little villages and hamlets that are being built, and they're fairly high density in this core, and then lower density kind of as you go to the outer rings, if you will. And so in those town center cores where you've got a mix of retail and office and residential, and oftentimes they'll be all in the same building or right next door to each other, that's where it really makes a lot of sense. And we are seeing district energy being considered, and that we're designing actually for a number of projects that are like that.
So last question, and I will say, Scott will be one of the presenters at our IGSHPA conference in December. So if you have more questions or want to hear more information, he will be at the conference with us in Nashville. But the last question is, generally speaking, do larger residential district systems, are they individually pumped by using small pumps in the house, or do you see more of a central pumping system?
When you're talking single family residential, each house has its own pump. So they're all individual.
Perfect. Well, that is it for us today. I want to thank you, Scott, so much for coming and talking to us. This is such an interesting topic, and I cannot wait to ask more questions in Nashville. I'm particularly interested in the registration process that you see in states as you register as, I assume, a utility. But we'll save that conversation for Nashville, which I'm sure it'll be just a fabulous one. Again, for everyone on the call, we will have our next presentation, our last town hall event in October. We'll send out the invitation for that soon. If anybody has any questions, again, feel free to email us at info@igshpa.org, and any questions that we may have missed in the chat, we'll send along to Scott and get the answer to you. But thank you everyone for coming, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Courtney.
Bye.